A shadow hung over Olympus, unseen yet ever present, like a storm waiting to break. The gods, in all their glory and power, felt it in the pit of their immortal souls. Something was coming, something beyond their comprehension, beyond their might. The air was thick with tension, an undercurrent of dread that not even the laughter of Dionysus could shake. Olympus, the shining pinnacle of divinity, was trembling. Whispers floated among the gods, whispers of an ancient prophecy spoken in the hushed tones of fear. Long ago, before even the birth of Zeus, a prophecy had been foretold by the oldest of all, one who had seen the rise and fall of worlds. This prophecy spoke of a creature so vast, so terrible, that even the Titans, in all their might, would pale in comparison. This creature, this harbinger of doom, would be born of Gaia, the earth itself, in a fury of revenge and sorrow. Gaia, the great mother of all, had watched as her children, the Titans, were cast down by Zeus and his kin. Her heart, once warm with the life she had created, grew cold with anger. She had given birth to the world and all its beings, yet she had been forced to witness her children's defeat. The Titans, her mighty offspring, had been shackled and buried deep within the earth, a punishment she could not forgive. It was then that Gaia's anger took form, and she birthed a being that would shake the heavens. Typhon. The name alone sent shivers through the hearts of the gods. Typhon was no ordinary creature. He was a force of nature, a monster born of pure rage and grief. His body was as tall as the sky, his wings stretched wide enough to block the sun, and his voice was a thunder that could split the earth in two. From his eyes, fire raged, and his breath was a tempest of scorching winds. He was born not only to destroy but to challenge the very order of the universe. His existence was a testament to Gaia's wrath, a living embodiment of her sorrow. Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, knew of the prophecy. From the moment he had seized the throne of Olympus, the words had echoed in his mind. He knew that his victory over the Titans had come at a cost, and that cost was the wrath of Gaia. But even in his wisdom and power, Zeus could not foresee when Typhon would rise. The uncertainty gnawed at him, a relentless fear that he kept hidden behind his stern gaze. He prepared for the day when he would face the creature that even the gods feared, but how does one prepare for the end of everything? The gods of Olympus were not immune to fear, though they tried to hide it. Hera, the queen, found herself staring out over the edge of Olympus, her thoughts plagued by visions of fire and ruin. Athena, wise and battle-hardened, tightened her grip on her spear, knowing that her wisdom might not be enough to save them. Even Ares, the god of war, felt a cold sweat on his brow as he imagined the battlefield where he might meet an opponent too fierce, even for him. As the days passed, the tension grew. The gods could feel Typhon's presence long before he ever set foot on the earth. It was as if the very air had changed, thick with the promise of destruction. The earth trembled beneath their feet, a warning from Gaia that her child was coming. The sky darkened, not from the setting sun, but from a shadow that grew ever larger, creeping across the heavens like a blanket of doom. Zeus gathered the gods, his voice steady, yet beneath it, there was a note of urgency. He spoke of the prophecy, of Typhon, and of the battle that awaited them all. He did not speak of victory, for even he did not know if they could win. But he spoke of courage, of the need to stand firm in the face of terror. The gods listened, their hearts heavy with the weight of the future, but they knew they had no choice. Typhon was coming, and with him, the fate of the universe would be decided. The hours before Typhon's arrival were the longest the gods had ever known. Each moment stretched into eternity, filled with the unknown. They had faced many enemies, fought many battles, but this was different. This was not a battle for power or pride, this was a battle for survival. They were not fighting for glory, but for the very existence of Olympus, of the world, of all that ever was or ever would be. Gaia's sorrow had given birth to a force that none could escape. Her pain was now the pain of the gods, a wound that could not be healed. As the first rumble of Typhon's footsteps shook the earth, the gods felt a chill that pierced their immortal bones. The time had come, the prophecy was no longer a whisper in the wind, but a reality that stood before them, colossal and unstoppable. Zeus stood tall, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the shadow of Typhon grew. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, the responsibility of a king, a father, a god. He had fought many battles, but this one was different. This was not just a fight for Olympus, but a fight for the throne of the universe itself. Typhon was not just a beast, but a challenge to the very order that Zeus had established. This battle was not just about strength, but about will, about heart, about the very essence of what it meant to be a god. The earth shook as Typhon approached, his roar echoing across the skies. The gods braced themselves, their hearts pounding in unison with the rumbling earth. They knew this was a battle that would be sung about for ages, a battle that would define the future. But in that moment, there was no room for thoughts of the future, only the present, only the impending clash that would either save or doom them all. The first sight of Typhon was enough to make even the bravest of gods falter. He was a mountain of fury, his eyes burning with the fires of hell itself. His wings spread wide, casting a shadow over Olympus that blotted out the sun. His roar shook the heavens, a sound that spoke of the end of days. The gods stood ready, their weapons drawn, their hearts steeled, but in their eyes, there was fear, fear of the unknown, of the beast that no prophecy could fully describe. Zeus stepped forward, his thunderbolt crackling with energy, a weapon forged in the heart of the universe. He knew that this was it, the moment of truth. There would be no second chances, no time to rethink or retreat. It was him against Typhon, the king against the monster, order against chaos. The battle for the throne of the universe had begun, and the outcome would be written in the stars for all eternity. From the darkest depths of the earth, where the sun's warmth could never reach, something stirred. It was not just a creature, but a force, raw and ancient, born from a mother's endless rage and sorrow. Typhon's birth was unlike any other. There was no joy, no celebration, only the earth splitting open, releasing a terror that would shake the very foundations of the world. Typhon rose from the churning abyss, a monstrous form that defied imagination. His body was a terrifying amalgamation of everything feared by mortals and gods alike. His lower half was a writhing mass of serpents, hissing and coiling, each one as deadly as a viper. His upper body was massive, with arms that reached to the heavens, each hand ending in 100 dragon heads, spewing fire and venom. His eyes blazed like molten lava, and his voice was a roar that could turn the bravest hearts to stone. When he spread his wings, they blotted out the sky, casting the world into a darkness so profound that even the stars hid their light. Typhon's power was unmatched, a whirlwind of destruction that knew no bounds. The earth trembled under his weight, mountains crumbled at his touch, and rivers boiled in his presence. Wherever he went, chaos followed. Villages were flattened, forests were set ablaze, and the very ground split open, swallowing everything in its path. Mortals cowered in fear, their prayers to the gods growing desperate and unanswered. For the gods themselves were not immune to the terror that Typhon brought. They watched from Olympus, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that this creature was unlike anything they had ever faced before. But Typhon was not content with simply wreaking havoc on the earth. He had a purpose, a mission fueled by the very rage that had given him life. He was the embodiment of Gaia's vengeance, and his sights were set on Olympus, the shining throne of the gods who had wronged his mother. Typhon's heart burned with a hatred that could only be quenched by the fall of Zeus and his kin. And so, as he tore through the world, he gathered to his side all those who shared his hatred of Olympus. Monsters of every kind flocked to Typhon's banner, drawn by his power and the promise of revenge. The giants, who had once fought alongside the Titans, now rose from their slumber, their massive forms towering over the landscape. The Harpies, with their sharp talons and piercing cries, swooped down from the skies, ready to tear apart anything in their path. The Hydras, with their many heads and venomous breath, slithered out of their lairs, eager to join the battle. Even the ancient dragons, whose flames could melt stone, bowed before Typhon, recognizing him as their true master. With each new ally, Typhon's power grew, and so did his confidence. He was not just a beast, but a leader, a commander of chaos. He stood at the head of an army that could challenge the very gods themselves, and his heart swelled with the certainty of victory. The time had come to make his intentions known, to declare war on the gods who had dared to defy the will of Gaia. Typhon's declaration was not made with words, but with action. He ascended Mount Olympus, his colossal form blocking out the sun as he approached the sacred mountain. The earth quaked with each step, the sky darkened, and the air grew thick with the scent of burning sulfur. The gods, who had once looked down upon the world with indifference, now looked up in fear, for they knew that their greatest challenge had arrived. With a roar that shook the heavens, Typhon unleashed his fury upon Olympus. His dragon head spewed fire, scorching the marble pillars of the gods' palaces. His serpentine legs lashed out, shattering the golden gates that guarded the mountain. The gods scrambled to defend their home, but even the combined might of Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Athena's spear could not stop the onslaught. Typhon was unstoppable, a living nightmare made flesh, and his rampage seemed as if it would have no end. But Typhon was not just seeking to destroy, he was seeking to overthrow. He wanted the throne of the universe for himself, to cast down Zeus and take his place as the ruler of all. He had no interest in the order that the gods had imposed upon the world. He was chaos incarnate, and he would rule with an iron fist, crushing anyone who dared to oppose him. His declaration of war was absolute, a challenge that could only end with the fall of one side or the other. Typhon's fury spread like wildfire across the earth. The once peaceful world was now a battleground, with monsters laying waste to everything in their path. The sky was filled with the smoke of burning cities, the ground was littered with the bodies of those who had tried to flee, and the seas churned with the blood of the fallen. There was no escape, no sanctuary, for Typhon's reach was vast, and his wrath was endless. In every corner of the world, creatures trembled at the sound of his name. Even the most fearsome of beasts bowed their heads in submission, for they knew that Typhon was the true king of monsters, the harbinger of doom. His rise was unstoppable, a wave of destruction that threatened to consume all in its path. The gods watched in horror as their world crumbled around them, their once unshakable confidence shattered by the sheer magnitude of Typhon's power. But Typhon was not satisfied with the devastation he had wrought. His eyes were fixed on Olympus, and his heart was set on tearing down the very throne of Zeus. He would not rest until the gods were cast from their lofty perch, and the world was plunged into the chaos from which it had come. Typhon's declaration was clear: the age of the gods was over, and the age of monsters had begun. The rise of Typhon was not just the rise of a monster, but the rise of a new order, one built on fear and destruction. The world as it had been known was gone, replaced by a nightmare that stretched from horizon to horizon. The gods, once the rulers of all, now found themselves on the brink of extinction, their very existence threatened by the creature that had risen from the depths. As Typhon's shadow loomed over Olympus, the gods knew that the battle ahead would be unlike any other. They were not just fighting for their throne, but for their very survival. The war that Typhon had declared would be the war to end all wars, and its outcome would determine the fate of the universe. The rise of Typhon was complete, and with it, the world stood on the edge of oblivion. The gods of Olympus, mighty and immortal, had never known true fear, until now. The ascent of Typhon sent a shudder through their very souls, a terror that seeped into the cracks of their divine confidence. For the first time, the gods looked upon the earth with dread, their hearts heavy with the realization that their greatest threat had finally emerged. The sky, once bright with the golden light of the sun, was now darkened by the shadow of the monsters that sought their end. Panic spread like wildfire through the halls of Olympus. The gods, who had once stood tall and unshakable, now felt the ground beneath them tremble with uncertainty. They gathered in the grand hall, their faces pale, their voices hushed with the weight of the impending doom. Even the laughter of Hermes, usually so quick to fill the air, was nowhere to be heard. Instead, there was only the sound of hurried whispers and the unspoken fear that hung between them all. Hera, the queen of the gods, clenched her hands tightly, her knuckles white as she stared out into the distance, her mind racing with thoughts of what Typhon's victory would mean. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, usually so composed and confident, felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had seen many battles, but none that had filled her with such a sense of impending loss. Even Ares, the god of war, who had never backed down from a fight, found himself pacing the hall, his usual bravado faltering. It was a sight that would have been unimaginable only days before. The gods of Olympus, reduced to shadows of their former selves, their power seemingly insignificant in the face of the beast that now threatened them. And in the midst of this chaos, there was one thought that crept into every god's mind, a thought they dared not speak aloud. Could Zeus, their king, truly protect them from this terror? Zeus, the lord of the skies, stood apart from the others, his eyes fixed on the horizon where Typhon's shadow loomed ever closer. He could feel their doubt, their fear, pressing down on him like a heavy weight. They looked to him for strength, for guidance, but even the mighty Zeus could not silence the voice inside him that whispered of the enormity of the challenge that lay ahead. Typhon was not like the Titans, not like any enemy he had faced before. This was something beyond the realm of the gods, a force of nature that threatened to undo everything he had built. As the first tremors of Typhon's approach shook the heavens, the gods made a decision that none would have ever imagined. They fled. In the dead of night, with the stars as their only witnesses, the gods left Olympus, their divine forms melting away as they took on the shapes of animals to hide themselves from the monster's wrath. They flew across the seas to the distant land of Egypt, their hearts heavy with the shame of abandoning their home. In Egypt, the gods found refuge, but not peace. They wandered the deserts and rivers in the forms of animals, Zeus as a ram, Hera as a cow, Apollo as a hawk, and Artemis as a cat. They hid among the reeds and shadows, their hearts pounding with every distant roar that reached their ears. But even in their new forms, they could not escape the fear that gnawed at them. They had run from Olympus, but they could not run from the knowledge that Typhon's shadow still loomed over the world. The once proud gods of Olympus now found themselves in a crisis of faith. They had always believed in their own invincibility, and the power of their king to protect them from any threat. But now, with Typhon's rise, that belief was crumbling. They whispered among themselves, their voices filled with doubt, questioning whether Zeus was truly capable of facing the monster alone. Had their king's strength been exaggerated? Was this the end of the gods as they knew them? Zeus, though far from his throne, felt the weight of their doubt. It was a burden heavier than any he had ever carried. He knew that the gods were losing faith, not just in him, but in themselves. And that loss of faith could be their undoing. He could not allow fear to take root in their hearts, to weaken them when they needed to be strong. But how could he restore their belief in him, in themselves, when even he felt the creeping tendrils of doubt? In the quiet of the desert night, Zeus made his decision. He could not allow Typhon's shadow to blot out the light of Olympus. He would face the beast alone, not just as a king, but as a god who had sworn to protect the world from chaos. He would show the gods that there was still hope, still strength in their cause. Zeus knew that the battle ahead would be the greatest of his life, but it was a battle he could not afford to lose, not just for his sake, but for the sake of all that existed. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, Zeus cast off his animal form, his divine presence once again filling the air with its overwhelming power. The gods, startled from their despair, looked up to see their king, standing tall and resolute, his eyes blazing with determination. In that moment, the doubts that had plagued them began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. If Zeus was willing to face Typhon alone, then perhaps there was still hope. Perhaps they were not as powerless as they had feared. Zeus turned to the gods, his voice strong and unwavering. He spoke not of fear, but of courage, not of defeat, but of the resolve to fight for what was theirs. He reminded them of who they were, the gods of Olympus, rulers of the skies, the earth, and the seas. Typhon might be a force of destruction, but they were the forces of life itself, and they would not go quietly into the night. They would stand and fight, not just for their own survival, but for the survival of all that was good and just in the world. The gods listened, their hearts swelling with the words of their king. The fear that had once gripped them began to melt away, replaced by a burning resolve to stand by Zeus's side, to fight for Olympus and for the world they had sworn to protect. They knew that the battle ahead would be fierce, that Typhon was a foe unlike any other, but they also knew that they were not alone. With Zeus leading them, they would face whatever came with courage and strength. As Zeus prepared to return to Olympus, the gods followed, no longer fleeing in fear, but marching in unity, their hearts filled with the fire of determination. Typhon might be powerful, but the gods of Olympus were not so easily defeated. They would fight, they would stand, and they would show the world that even in the face of the greatest darkness, the light of Olympus would not be extinguished. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath as Zeus descended from Olympus, his thunderbolts crackling in the air, lighting up the heavens with their fierce energy. On the horizon, Typhon loomed, a shadow so vast and terrifying that it swallowed the light, leaving the world in an eerie twilight. The earth trembled beneath Typhon's weight, the very mountains bowing to his monstrous form. Zeus knew this was it, the moment that would decide the fate of the gods and the world they had sworn to protect. With a roar that shook the heavens, Zeus hurled his first thunderbolt at Typhon, the air splitting with a deafening crack as the bolt struck its mark. But Typhon barely flinched. The lightning sizzled against his scaly skin, and he turned his many heads toward Zeus, his eyes burning with a hatred so intense it seemed to scorch the sky. In response, Typhon unleashed a torrent of fire from his mouth, a wave of molten fury that surged toward Zeus like an unstoppable tide. Zeus raised his aegis, the shield that had protected him in countless battles, and the flames crashed against it, sending sparks flying in every direction. The heat was unbearable, and the force of the attack drove Zeus back, his feet digging into the ground as he struggled to hold his ground. But Typhon was relentless. He surged forward, his massive form blotting out the sky, and with a swipe of his colossal arm, he sent Zeus tumbling through the air. The world seemed to tilt as Zeus crashed to the ground, the impact sending shockwaves rippling across the earth. But he was not defeated. Zeus rose, his eyes blazing with determination, and with a cry of defiance, he summoned the winds, the skies answering his call with a howling fury. Tornadoes whipped through the air, the winds tearing at Typhon's flesh, but the monster only laughed, his voice a rumble that made the mountains tremble. He was not a creature of the earth, nor the sky, he was something more, something ancient and unstoppable. Typhon lunged at Zeus, his serpent legs coiling and striking with the speed of lightning. Zeus dodged, barely avoiding the fangs that dripped with venom potent enough to melt stone. But Typhon was faster than Zeus had anticipated. In a blur of movement, Typhon's tail lashed out, catching Zeus across the chest. The force of the blow sent Zeus sprawling, his breath leaving him in a painful gasp as he struggled to rise. But Typhon was not finished. He bore down on Zeus, his many heads snapping and snarling, each one a dragon's mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. Zeus barely had time to raise his shield before the first hit struck, the impact driving him to his knees. Another head followed, then another, each one striking with the force of a hurricane, battering Zeus until he could no longer hold back the onslaught. The ground beneath him cracked and shattered, the earth itself seeming to recoil from the force of the battle. Finally, with a deafening roar, Typhon struck with all his might. His claws raked across Zeus's chest, tearing through armor and flesh, leaving deep, burning wounds that oozed with divine blood. Zeus cried out, the sound echoing across the heavens as he staggered back, his vision blurring from the pain. But Typhon was merciless. He struck again and again, until Zeus could barely stand, his once glorious strength fading under the relentless assault. The gods watched from Olympus, their hearts filled with despair as they saw their king, their protector, brought to his knees by the monsters that threatened to end everything. They had never seen Zeus so vulnerable, so close to defeat. The confidence that had once filled their hearts was gone, replaced by a cold, creeping fear that perhaps Typhon was truly unstoppable. In that moment, as Typhon towered over him, Zeus knew he could not win this battle, not here, not now. The pain in his chest was overwhelming, his strength all but drained. The world around him seemed to dim, the edges of his vision darkening as his body cried out for rest, for respite from the onslaught. But Zeus was a god, and he knew that surrender was not an option. He had to retreat, to regroup, to find a way to overcome this nightmare. With the last of his strength, Zeus summoned the winds once more, creating a barrier between himself and Typhon, a swirling vortex that bought him precious seconds to escape. Typhon roared in frustration, his fiery breath searing the air, but Zeus was already gone, the winds carrying him away from the battlefield, away from the monster that had nearly ended him. Zeus retreated to a distant mountain, far from the chaos and destruction, his body broken, his spirit battered. He collapsed on the cold stone, the pain in his chest like a searing fire that refused to be extinguished. For the first time in his immortal life, Zeus felt the icy touch of fear. Typhon was more powerful than he had ever imagined, and the thought of facing him again filled Zeus with a dread that he had never known. The gods, sensing their king's retreat, felt their hearts sink even further. If Zeus could not defeat Typhon, what hope did they have? Their faith, once unshakable, now wavered, and the fears that had gripped them before returned with a vengeance. They huddled together, their divine forms trembling, as the weight of their situation pressed down on them like a suffocating blanket. But even in his pain, Zeus knew that the battle was far from over. He had not fallen completely, and as long as he still drew breath, there was a chance, a slim, fragile chance, that Typhon could be stopped. But that chance rested on his shoulders, on his ability to find the strength to rise again, to face the monster that had brought him to his knees. Zeus lay on the cold stone, the world around him silent and still, as he gathered his strength, his resolve hardening like steel. The gods might despair, but he could not afford to. The fate of Olympus, of the entire world, rested on him, and though Typhon had won this battle, the war was far from over. Zeus would rise again, and when he did, he would be ready. Typhon had unleashed his fury, but the wrath of Zeus, king of the gods, was yet to come. Zeus had never known a defeat like this. His once mighty form lay battered and broken, hidden away in a distant cave as he struggled to regain his strength. The wounds from his clash with Typhon were deep, both in flesh and spirit, and for the first time in his eternal life, Zeus felt the cold grip of despair. The king of the gods, the ruler of Olympus, had been brought low by a force more terrible than anything he had ever faced. But Typhon was not satisfied with merely injuring Zeus. The monstrous creature, fueled by rage and a thirst for absolute domination, sought to destroy the very essence of the god who had defied him. As Zeus lay weakened, Typhon tracked him down, his many heads sniffing out the faint scent of divine blood. The earth trembled with each step Typhon took, his approach like the drumbeat of doom that echoed through the silent cave. Zeus, barely able to stand, knew he was no match for Typhon in his current state. The once great god could only watch in horror as Typhon's monstrous form filled the entrance of the cave, blocking out the light and casting a shadow so dark it seemed to swallow all hope. With a ferocity that sent shivers through the earth itself, Typhon lunged at Zeus, and before the king of the gods could react, the monster had him in his grasp. With terrifying strength, Typhon ripped the sinews from Zeus's limbs, stripping him of his power, his divinity, and his ability to fight back. The pain was excruciating, a torment that reached into the very core of Zeus's being. The god who had once wielded thunderbolts with ease now lay helpless, his strength taken from him, his body broken beyond recognition. The agony was unbearable, and yet Zeus could not cry out, his voice stolen by the sheer intensity of his suffering. Typhon, satisfied with his victory, left Zeus to wither in the dark, his once mighty form now nothing more than a shell of what it had been. The monster turned his attention to Olympus, the home of the gods, and with a roar that shook the heavens, he declared himself the new ruler of the universe. The gods, still reeling from the sight of their king's defeat, fled in terror, scattering to the farthest corners of the earth to escape Typhon's wrath. Olympus, once a beacon of light and power, fell into darkness under Typhon's reign. The thrones of the gods stood empty, their temples abandoned, as Typhon rampaged through the sacred halls, his monstrous laughter echoing off the marble walls. The skies above Olympus were dark, the air thick with the scent of fear and despair. The world below trembled as Typhon's tyranny spread, his power growing with each passing day. But not all hope was lost. Hidden among the shadows, two gods refused to abandon their king. Hermes, the swift-footed messenger, and Pan, the god of the wild, knew that without Zeus, the world would fall into chaos. They could not allow Typhon to reign unchallenged, and so they hatched a daring plan to rescue their fallen king and restore his power. Hermes, with his winged sandals, flew through the night, moving with the speed of the wind as he sought out the cave where Zeus lay imprisoned. Pan, with his wild heart and unyielding courage, followed closely behind, his goat's legs carrying him over the rough terrain with ease. The journey was long and perilous, the darkness pressing in on them from all sides, but neither god wavered. They knew what was at stake, and they would not fail. When they finally reached the cave, the sight of Zeus, broken and weak, filled them with a sorrow so deep it nearly brought them to their knees. But there was no time for despair. Hermes, with his clever hands, retrieved the stolen sinews, carefully reattaching them to Zeus's body, while Pan stood guard, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of Typhon. The work was delicate, and every second felt like an eternity, but Hermes' skill was unmatched, and slowly, the strength began to return to Zeus's limbs. As the last sinew was placed, Zeus felt a spark of power reignite within him, a flicker of the divine strength that had once coursed through his veins. He stood, though unsteadily, and as he did, the cave seemed to brighten, the darkness retreating before the growing light of his restored power. The pain was still there, the wound still raw, but Zeus's resolve had never been stronger. He had been brought low, but he was not defeated. He would rise, and he would take back what was his. With the help of Hermes and Pan, Zeus left the cave, his steps growing surer with each passing moment. The world outside was bleak, the skies darkened by Typhon's shadow, but Zeus no longer felt fear. The monster had underestimated him, had thought that stripping him of his strength would be enough to break him. But Zeus was more than just his power. He was the king of the gods, the protector of the world, and he would not be broken so easily. Zeus's mind burned with the need for vengeance, but more than that, with the need to protect his fellow gods, his home, and the mortal world that had placed its faith in him. Typhon had spread terror and chaos, but now it was time for the light to return, for order to be restored. Zeus knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the battle to come would test him like never before, but he was ready. His wounds had healed, his strength had returned, and his determination was stronger than ever. As he stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the world that had fallen into darkness, Zeus raised his hand, and with a crack of thunder that split the heavens, he called forth the lightning. The sky lit up with his power, the air humming with the energy of the storm that gathered above. The gods, hiding in their fear, saw the light, heard the thunder, and their hearts stirred with hope. Zeus, with Hermes and Pan by his side, descended from the mountain, his eyes fixed on the horizon where Typhon's shadow loomed. The battle was far from over, but Zeus was no longer afraid. He had been captured, broken, stripped of his power, but he had risen from the darkness stronger than before. Typhon had shown him the depths of despair, but Zeus had found within himself the strength to rise above it. The king of the gods was ready to reclaim his throne, and the world would once again feel the full force of his wrath. Zeus stood at the edge of the world, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the storm clouds gathered, dark and ominous. The air was thick with anticipation, every breath a struggle as the weight of what was to come pressed down on him. The world had been plunged into darkness, but now there was a flicker of light, a hope that had been reignited, though fragile. Zeus knew that this was the calm before the storm, the brief moment of silence before the clash of titans that would decide the fate of the universe. The memories of his defeat, the pain and humiliation at the hands of Typhon, still burned in his mind. But it was that very pain that fueled his resolve. Zeus was not just planning for a battle, he was preparing for the ultimate confrontation, one that would either restore the balance of the cosmos or plunge it into eternal chaos. He could not allow himself to fail again. Zeus began to summon his allies, the gods who had once fled in fear now returned to his side. Their faith in him had been shaken, but as they saw the fire in his eyes, the unyielding determination that had been born from his suffering, they too felt a renewed sense of purpose. One by one, the Olympian gods gathered, each bringing with them the power and strength that had made them immortal. There was no room for doubt now. They had seen what Typhon was capable of, and they knew that this battle would demand everything they had. Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, worked tirelessly to craft weapons that would stand against the might of Typhon. The clang of hammer on metal rang through the air, each strike echoing with the promise of vengeance. Sparks flew as Hephaestus poured all his skill into forging new weapons, each one imbued with the divine essence of the gods. These were no ordinary weapons. They were creations born of desperation and hope, designed to channel the very power of Olympus. As the weapons took shape, Zeus felt a surge of power within him. He could feel the energy of the storm gathering around him, the winds whipping through the mountains, the sky darkening with the promise of thunder. The storm was his, born of his will, a reflection of the turmoil within his heart. It was a force of nature, uncontrollable and wild, just as Typhon was. But Zeus was not afraid. He would harness this power, bend it to his will, and use it to strike down the monsters that had brought so much suffering to the world. But weapons alone would not be enough. Zeus knew that he needed more than just strength. He needed strategy, cunning, and the wisdom of the ancients. He sought out the oldest and wisest of the gods, those who had seen the rise and fall of empires, who had witnessed the birth of the cosmos. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices carrying the weight of ages, as they shared their knowledge with Zeus. They told him of ancient powers that could be summoned, forces that had been forgotten in the mists of time, but that still held great power. Zeus listened intently, his mind racing as he pieced together the plan that would lead them to victory. The gods of Olympus were not the only ones preparing for battle. The creatures of the earth, the beasts and spirits that had once roamed freely, felt the shift in the air. They too began to stir, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. Zeus sent out his messengers to the farthest reaches of the world, calling upon the ancient allies that had once fought alongside the gods. These were beings of immense power, creatures of legend that had been forgotten by mortals but were still remembered by the gods. They answered the call, their loyalty to Zeus unwavering, ready to stand against the darkness that threatened to consume everything. The tension in the air was palpable, a living thing that crept into the hearts of all who sensed it. Olympus buzzed with activity, the gods preparing themselves for the battle that would determine the fate of the universe. There was fear, yes, but there was also a fierce determination, a burning desire to reclaim what had been lost. They had been humbled, but they had not been broken. Zeus's resolve had reignited the fire within them, and now they stood united, ready to face whatever came their way. Zeus, standing at the center of it all, felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Every decision, every command he gave, carried the lives of his fellow gods and the fate of the universe. He knew that this battle would test him like never before, pushing him to the very limits of his strength and beyond. But he was ready. The storm inside him had grown into a raging tempest, and he would unleash it upon Typhon with all the fury of a god scorned. The final preparations were being made. The weapons were forged, the allies gathered, and the ancient powers summoned. The gods, once scattered and afraid, now stood tall, their eyes shining with the light of renewed hope. They were ready to fight, ready to reclaim their home, ready to restore order to the universe. But beneath the surface, the fear still lingered. Typhon was a force unlike any other, a creature born of the earth's deepest anger, a being of such immense power that even the gods trembled in his presence. Zeus knew this, but he also knew that there was no turning back. The storm had been unleashed, and it would not be stopped until either Typhon was defeated or Olympus lay in ruins. As the final moments before the battle ticked away, Zeus looked out over the gathering of gods and creatures. His heart swelled with pride, for despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, they had all chosen to stand with him. This was more than just a fight for survival, it was a fight for everything they held dear, for the world they had built, for the order they had created out of chaos. Zeus knew that this was his moment, the moment when he would either prove himself as the king of the gods or fall trying. The storm clouds rumbled overhead, the first flashes of lightning illuminating the darkened sky. The winds howled, carrying with them the scent of rain and the promise of battle. Zeus tightened his grip on his thunderbolt, feeling the power coursing through his veins. The time had come. The final confrontation was upon them, and there would be no mercy, no retreat. This was the gathering storm, the moment before the clash of titans, and Zeus was ready to face it head-on. The sky split open with a deafening roar as Zeus hurled his thunderbolt toward Typhon. The world held its breath as the bolt of pure, raw power surged through the storm-darkened sky, aimed straight at the heart of the monstrous beast that had brought Olympus to its knees. Typhon, towering above the battlefield, let out a thunderous bellow, a sound that shook the very foundations of the earth. The time for the final battle had come, and the fate of the universe hung in the balance. The gods of Olympus, once filled with doubt and fear, now stood united, their hearts steeled by the resolve of their king. Ares, the god of war, charged forward with a battle cry that echoed across the heavens, his spear aimed at Typhon's massive form. The ground trembled beneath his feet as he closed the distance, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. But Typhon, with a sweep of his colossal arm, sent Ares crashing into the mountains, the force of the blow sending shockwaves through the earth. Hera, queen of the gods, summoned the winds to buffet Typhon from all sides, hoping to slow the beast's advance. But Typhon was undeterred, his every step shaking the ground as he pressed forward, his eyes locked on Zeus. The beast's power was unimaginable, a force of destruction that seemed unstoppable. But Zeus, unyielding in his determination, stood firm, his eyes blazing with the fire of the storm. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, took to the skies, her golden armor gleaming as she flew toward Typhon's head. With precision and grace, she launched her spear, aiming for the beast's eye. But Typhon was quick, swatting her aside as though she were nothing more than a fly. Athena crashed to the ground, but she rose again, her resolve unbroken. This battle was not just about strength, it was about strategy, cunning, and the will to fight for what was right. Poseidon, god of the sea, called forth the waters, summoning a tidal wave that surged toward Typhon with relentless force. The wave crashed into the beast, knocking him off balance for a brief moment. The god seized the opportunity, launching a coordinated attack from all sides. Arrows of light shot from Artemis's bow, Hermes darted in and out of the fray, striking with lightning speed, and Apollo unleashed a barrage of fiery arrows that exploded upon impact. But even as the gods fought with all their might, Typhon seemed to absorb the blows, his monstrous form refusing to falter. The battle raged on, the clash of titanic forces shaking the very heavens. Thunder rumbled, lightning flashed, and the earth groaned under the weight of the conflict. Typhon's roars of fury echoed through the mountains, a terrifying sound that struck fear into the hearts of all who heard it. But the gods did not waver. They fought with everything they had, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the universe depended on their victory. In the midst of the chaos, Zeus faced Typhon head-on. The two titans clashed with a force that shook the cosmos. Zeus's thunderbolts met Typhon's fiery breath in a dazzling display of power, the sky lighting up with every strike. Typhon lashed out with his 100 snake-like heads, each one snapping at Zeus with deadly intent. Zeus dodged and countered, his movements fueled by the strength of the storm that raged within him. But even as Zeus fought with all his might, Typhon's strength seemed inexhaustible. The beast's massive form loomed over Zeus, and with a mighty swing, Typhon struck, sending Zeus crashing to the ground. The gods gasped in horror as their king, the ruler of Olympus, lay battered and broken. Typhon let out a triumphant roar, the sound of victory that echoed through the heavens. But Zeus was not finished. Summoning the last of his strength, he rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with the light of the storm. With a mighty cry, he called upon the power of the cosmos, the very forces of nature bending to his will. The sky darkened, and a storm unlike any other began to brew, the winds howling and the lightning crackling with furious energy. Zeus's body crackled with power, the air around him shimmering with electricity. Typhon, sensing the shift in power, roared in defiance and charged at Zeus with all the fury of a storm unleashed. But Zeus, with a calm born of absolute resolve, raised his hand and unleashed the full might of his power. A bolt of lightning, brighter than the sun, shot from his hand, striking Typhon square in the chest. The impact was cataclysmic, a blast of energy that lit up the sky and sent shockwaves rippling across the earth. Typhon staggered, his massive form swaying as the light of the thunderbolt seared through him. The gods watched in awe as the beast, once unstoppable, began to falter. But Zeus did not let up. He struck again and again, each thunderbolt more powerful than the last, each one driving Typhon back, pushing him to the brink of defeat. The tide of battle had turned. The other gods, seeing their king's renewed strength, rallied and joined the attack. Poseidon unleashed another tidal wave, Athena struck with her spear, and Artemis's arrows rained down like a storm of light. Even the creatures of the earth, summoned by Zeus's call, joined the fray, their roars and cries adding to the cacophony of battle. Typhon, now overwhelmed by the combined might of the gods and their allies, began to weaken. His once invincible form was battered and bruised, his fiery breath no longer held the same destructive power. Zeus, sensing the end was near, gathered all the strength he had left for one final strike. With a roar that shook the heavens, he hurled his thunderbolt, the most powerful one yet, straight at Typhon's heart. The bolt struck true, piercing through Typhon's chest with a blinding flash of light. The beast let out a final, agonizing roar, a sound that echoed through the mountains and faded into silence. Typhon, the scourge of Olympus, the terror of the gods, crumpled to the ground, his massive form collapsing into the earth. The battle was over. The gods, breathless and weary, watched as the dust settled, the silence of victory heavy in the air. Zeus stood over the fallen Typhon, his chest heaving with exhaustion but his eyes burning with triumph. The storm that had raged within him was finally at peace, the fury of the battle giving way to the calm of victory. Typhon had been defeated, and Olympus was saved. The final battle had been fought, and the gods of Olympus had emerged victorious. The universe, once again, was safe under the watchful eye of Zeus, king of the gods. The earth trembled as Zeus stood over the fallen Typhon, his breath heavy with the weight of victory. The battle had been fierce, the clash of powers so immense that the very fabric of the world had quivered in fear. But now, in this final moment, the king of the gods had emerged victorious. Typhon, the great terror, lay vanquished at his feet, his monstrous form broken and defeated. The air was thick with the scent of ash and ozone, remnants of the titanic struggle that had just unfolded. Zeus, though exhausted, knew that the battle was not truly over until Typhon was dealt with once and for all. The beast's defeat was a moment of triumph, but it also carried a sense of gravity, a recognition that this creature's power could not be allowed to threaten the world again. With a final burst of strength, Zeus raised his hand, calling upon the deepest reserves of his power. Lightning crackled around him, illuminating the darkened sky as he prepared to banish Typhon to Tartarus, the darkest pit of the underworld. The winds howled, and the ground beneath Typhon began to crack open, revealing the yawning chasm that would serve as his eternal prison. As the earth split wide, Typhon's massive form was engulfed by the churning darkness below. The beast roared in defiance, his voice echoing through the mountains one last time, but it was no use. The forces of Tartarus pulled at him, dragging him down into the abyss. Zeus stood firm, his resolve unshaken, as he watched Typhon descend into the void. The beast's many heads thrashed in futile rage, his fiery breath flickering out as he was swallowed by the depths of the earth. The gods of Olympus, who had fought so valiantly, watched in awe and relief as their greatest foe was finally subdued. For what felt like an eternity, they had battled this monstrous force, risking everything to protect their home, their people, and the very existence of the world. Now, at last, the threat was contained, and peace could be restored. The chasm that had opened to receive Typhon slowly began to close, the earth sealing itself shut over the beast's prison. Zeus, his expression one of grim satisfaction, traced a line in the air with his thunderbolt, locking the prison with a divine seal. Typhon was now bound to Tartarus, his power trapped beneath the earth where it could do no harm. The gods knew that he would remain there, locked away for all eternity, unable to rise again. With Typhon defeated, the clouds that had darkened the sky began to part, letting the golden light of the sun break through. The warmth of the sun's rays touched the faces of the gods, and for the first time in what felt like an age, they allowed themselves to breathe easily. The storm that had raged in the heavens was finally over, and with it, the era of fear and chaos that Typhon had brought to the world. As the light spread across the battlefield, the gods looked around at the destruction that had been wrought. The earth was scarred, the mountains shattered, and the rivers diverted from their courses by the ferocity of the battle. But amidst the ruin, there was also a sense of renewal. The victory over Typhon was a victory not just for Olympus, but for all of creation. The gods had faced their darkest hour and emerged triumphant, their unity and strength reaffirmed in the face of overwhelming odds. Zeus, his strength returning with the dawn, turned to his fellow gods, his heart swelling with pride for those who had stood by him. Each of them had fought with a courage and determination that would be remembered for all time. Hera, Athena, Poseidon, Apollo, Artemis, and the rest, each had played a crucial role in the battle, and together, they had saved the world from destruction. The gods began their ascent back to Olympus, their home that had been threatened by Typhon's wrath. As they climbed, the land around them began to heal, the scars of battle fading with every step. The rivers found their paths again, the mountains began to reform, and the forests, once burned by Typhon's fire, started to grow anew. It was as if the world itself was celebrating the defeat of the great monster, rejoicing in the return of peace and order. Upon reaching Olympus, the gods were greeted by a scene of celebration. The remaining inhabitants of the celestial palace, those who had hidden in fear during Typhon's rampage, now emerged to welcome their heroes. The air was filled with cheers and songs of victory, as nymphs, muses, and other divine beings danced and sang in honor of Zeus and the gods. The once fearful halls of Olympus were now alive with joy, the walls echoing with the sound of laughter and celebration. Zeus, though weary from the battle, felt a profound sense of relief wash over him. He had fulfilled his role as protector of the universe, and his victory over Typhon would stand as a testament to the strength and resilience of the gods. He knew that the scars of this battle would take time to heal, both on the earth and in the hearts of those who had fought, but he also knew that they would emerge stronger, their bond as gods unbreakable. The celebration continued long into the night, the stars shining brightly in the clear sky above Olympus. The gods, now restored to their rightful places, reveled in their victory, their hearts lightened by the knowledge that they had secured the safety of the world. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued them for so long were finally gone, replaced by a sense of triumph and hope for the future. As the night drew on, the gods began to retire to their chambers, each carrying with them the memories of the battle and the knowledge that they had faced the greatest challenge of their existence and had emerged victorious. Zeus stood on the balcony of his palace, looking out over the world that he had fought so hard to protect. The stars twinkled in the sky, and the gentle breeze carried the sounds of laughter and celebration from the halls behind him. For the first time in a long while, Zeus allowed himself to smile. The battle was over, Typhon was defeated, and the world was safe. The gods had reclaimed their thrones, and the universe was once again in balance. As Zeus gazed out at the night sky, he knew that this victory would be remembered for all time, a victory not just for the gods, but for all who called the world their home. The winds of change swept through Olympus as the gods gathered to rebuild their shattered home. The once majestic palace, with its gleaming towers and intricate halls, had been reduced to ruins by the wrath of Typhon. The scars of the battle were still fresh, the echoes of their struggle reverberating in every corner of the celestial realm. Yet, amidst the rubble and destruction, there was a quiet determination, a resolve to restore what had been lost and to make Olympus even stronger than before. Zeus stood at the center of it all, his gaze sweeping over the remnants of his kingdom. The weight of the battle hung heavy on his shoulders, but his spirit remained unbroken. The king of the gods knew that the task ahead was monumental, but he also knew that the gods would rise to the challenge. Their unity in the face of Typhon's terror had forged an unbreakable bond, and now that bond would guide them in rebuilding their world. With a steady hand, Zeus raised his thunderbolt, channeling the power that had once subdued Typhon into the very foundations of Olympus. Lightning crackled and surged through the ruins, infusing the stones with new life. Slowly, the walls began to rebuild themselves, the towers rising once more towards the heavens. The palace, once a symbol of divine authority, was being reborn, stronger, more resilient, a testament to the endurance of the gods. As the palace took shape, the other gods joined in the restoration. Poseidon summoned the waters of the earth, cleansing the scars left by the battle and bringing forth new life to the parched land. Athena, with her wisdom and skill, oversaw the reconstruction, ensuring that every detail was perfect, every stone placed with care. Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, crafted new weapons and tools, his hands working tirelessly to arm the gods for whatever challenges might come next. Amidst the rebuilding, there was a quiet reverence for what had been lost. The gods moved with a sense of purpose, their actions guided by the memory of the battle and the knowledge that they had narrowly averted disaster. The scars on their hearts were deep, but they wore them with pride, proof of their courage, their strength, and their unwavering commitment to the cosmos. As the palace of Olympus rose once more, so too did the authority of Zeus. The king of the gods, who had faced the greatest threat to his reign, now stood taller than ever. His victory over Typhon had solidified his rule, and with it, the order of the cosmos was reaffirmed. The other gods looked to him not just as their leader, but as the protector of all that existed, the guardian of the delicate balance between chaos and order. But the battle had also left its mark on the relationships among the gods. There was a newfound respect for one another, a recognition of the strength that each god had brought to the fight. Old rivalries were set aside, and in their place grew a sense of camaraderie, of shared purpose. The gods had faced their darkest hour together, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that would endure for all time. Yet, beneath the surface, there were also wounds that needed healing. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped Olympus during the battle could not be easily forgotten. Some gods questioned their own strength, their own role in the grand order of things. Others looked to Zeus with a new understanding, seeing not just a king, but a god who had faced the ultimate test and emerged victorious. Trust had been tested, alliances strained, but in the end, the gods knew that they were stronger together. As Olympus was restored, so too was peace to the world. The chaos that had spread across the earth during Typhon's rampage began to fade, the natural order reasserting itself. The sun shone brighter, the rivers flowed more freely, and the earth itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Mortals, who had lived in fear during the battle, now looked to the sky with hope, knowing that the gods had protected them once again. In the quiet moments that followed the restoration, the gods reflected on the enduring legacy of the battle. It was a story that would be told for generations, a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the triumph of order over chaos. The scars left by Typhon would serve as a reminder of the fragility of peace and the constant vigilance required to maintain it. But above all, the battle was a testament to the resilience of Olympus. The gods had faced their greatest challenge and emerged stronger, their unity and strength reaffirmed in the face of overwhelming odds. The palace that now stood before them, gleaming in the light of the sun, was more than just a home. It was a symbol of their enduring legacy, a beacon of hope for all who looked to the heavens. And so, as the last stone was set, and the final touches were made, the gods of Olympus stood together, their hearts filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had rebuilt their world, restored their authority, and brought peace to the cosmos. The battle had been won, but more importantly, they had ensured that the order of the universe would endure. In the stillness that followed the great battle, the significance of what had transpired began to echo through the annals of time. The clash between Zeus and Typhon was more than just a war of power, it was a defining moment that shaped the very fabric of Greek mythology, leaving an indelible mark on the stories that would be told for generations. The battle between Zeus and Typhon was not just a physical confrontation but a cosmic struggle between order and chaos. Typhon, the embodiment of destruction and anarchy, sought to unseat Zeus and plunged the world into turmoil. Zeus's victory, therefore, was not merely a personal triumph, it was the triumph of order over chaos, of light over darkness. In defeating Typhon, Zeus reaffirmed his role as the protector of the cosmos, the one who ensured that the world remained in balance. This victory held profound symbolism. Zeus's triumph was a reassurance to the world that even in the face of the greatest threat, order would prevail. It was a reminder that chaos, no matter how powerful, could never fully extinguish the light of order and justice. Zeus's victory became a symbol of hope and stability, a beacon that would guide the beliefs and values of those who worshipped the gods. As the story of the battle spread, it began to influence the myths and legends that followed. The image of Zeus standing victorious over Typhon became a recurring theme in art, literature, and oral traditions. It served as a constant reminder of the power of the gods and the fragility of the world they protected. The battle was not just a single event in mythology, it became a cornerstone of the Greek understanding of the divine and the natural world. The moral and philosophical lessons drawn from the myth were vast. The story of Zeus and Typhon carried with it a message of resilience and determination. It taught that no matter how overwhelming the odds, no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always a way to fight back, to stand strong against the forces of destruction. The myth encouraged the belief that justice and order, embodied by Zeus, would always find a way to triumph over chaos. This tale also offered a reflection on leadership and responsibility. Zeus's willingness to face Typhon, even when the other gods doubted him, showcased the qualities of a true leader: courage, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to protect those under his care. His actions were a reminder that leadership was not just about power, but about using that power for the greater good, about making sacrifices to ensure the safety and well-being of the world. The enduring power of Zeus, as demonstrated in this battle, became a fundamental aspect of his identity. He was not just a ruler, he was the ultimate authority, the guardian of order who would go to any lengths to preserve the balance of the cosmos. His victory over Typhon was a testament to his unmatched strength and wisdom, qualities that solidified his position as the king of the gods and the ruler of the universe. The legacy of the battle was felt not only in the myths that followed, but in the hearts and minds of those who heard the tale. It became a source of inspiration, a story that transcended its time to become a symbol of hope and resilience. The lessons of the battle, the symbolism of Zeus's victory, and the moral teachings it imparted continue to resonate through the ages, shaping the beliefs and values of countless generations. As the story of Zeus and Typhon was passed down, it became clear that this was not just a tale of gods and monsters. It was a story of the eternal struggle between order and chaos, of the challenges that must be faced to maintain balance in the world. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, there was always hope, always a way to restore order and ensure that the light would continue to shine. In the end, the battle between Zeus and Typhon was more than just a fight for the throne of the universe. It was a battle for the soul of the world, a defining moment that shaped the destiny of gods and mortals alike. The story of this battle, with its rich symbolism and profound lessons, would continue to inspire, to teach, and to remind all who heard it of the enduring power of order, the strength of justice, and the unbreakable will of Zeus, the ruler of the universe.